that you're going to be happy. Right? It's not. Not only does the state not guarantee your happiness as a citizen, the state cannot guarantee your happiness as citizen. Right? The state cannot guarantee that you'll be happy. Right? In a very sort of, I don't know how deep I want to go with this, right? But in a very sort of interesting sense, it would be good research to take Al-Farabi and Nietzsche's nihilism and combine the two, right? Nietzsche doesn't really get political. Me personally, I love the political applicability of Nietzsche, even though he does it in terms of religion. But the idea is, there is a sense in which sort of Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, that recognition of nihilism, that recognition of misery, that recognition of self-reflection and uselessness and meaninglessness, all of that nihilistic sort of discourse manifests precisely at this level. And the idea is, well, someone has to make me happy then. Right? Everything's collapsed around me. All my values have collapsed upon themselves. I fall into a state, if you don't know what you're doing, you fall into a state of meaninglessness, and I literally went through about 2 years of this state. So I've been there, I know what it feels like, and it's painful. It's super painful, but I regress. You fall into the state of meaninglessness. Hopefully you have Nietzsche, you read him, and then you get out of the state, but you fall into the state of meaninglessness, and you think to yourself, someone's got to make me happy, right? So some people turn to religion. Right? And they look, and this is the divine aspect, and this is obvious, and I think it's justifiable. I'm not saying it's not justifiable. I'm just not interested in incorporating it in my lecture. Right? So some people turn to religion, right? You might turn to the Torah, you might turn to the Quran, you might turn to the Bible, and then you find a sense of meaning in that state, right? So that it becomes real for you. In a political sense, as I've just recognized in myself, I almost slipped into a state of meaninglessness again. In a political sense, not many people do this. As a philosopher, since I erased it, but since I, in a sense, I serve the ruling class, whatever the hell that means, you know, some turn to the state for their meaning in life. My service to the state, literally sacrificing my physical body, my mind, everything, in service of the state. But then we recognize that the state can collapse. What we thought was there. Even as smart as we are, Jason, you know this, why the... You know this, you know this, you know this. You hit yourself in the head because you know this. But you become so passionate, right? You just like, no, it really, it's almost nauseating. It is, like, physically, you give yourself, like, people give themselves to religion. They do. But don't get it twisted. Some people, maybe not as many, give themselves to the state. Like they really, like how a religious fanatic gives themselves to religion. Some people out there give themselves equally fanatically to the state. I am here to serve. And they live it. But when that collapses and they start to see the kinks, you slip back again into, this is like I'm lecturing for myself now. Man. Oh. This won't make sense for 99% of you, and I apologize. Hopefully, just personally, you slip back into that meaninglessness. It's a scary thing to be in a state of meaninglessness, because if I identify myself in the class of philosopher and I can't serve the institution because the institution is bullshit, then like what am I doing here? My existence means nothing, and it's a very and I'm not trying to be a heady existentialist out there. What is he talking about? But I've done too much reading for this not to be something that I live, right? So, but then I remember I've read Al-Farabi, and the state isn't promised to make me happy. That's not the job function of the state, and I got to remember that. And you got to remember that, right? The state's not here to prevent misery, right? It shouldn't induce it, but it's not here to prevent it. It shouldn't. That's a key distinction, Jason. Everybody, it shouldn't go about. It shouldn't have the goal of increasing misery, but it's also not there to regulate. It can't concern itself with your psychological state. That's why. But you got to give it up to the states that do. So you have the CDC, and the CDC says, hey, make sure you run and eat healthy and have friends and blah blah blah, so that you live a happy mental life. And we recognize in a very real sense, and I tease and I jab at psychologists and psychiatrists all the time, but there's guys like Cho that go around and they need help mentally. They're off. right? So, you know, I wouldn't want to live in a society where there are no psychiatrists and psychologists. I wouldn't want to live in a society where people weren't getting pills to correct their mind states. I know that's not appropriate because some people believe that, you know, all psychological diagnoses are fake, but I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people at all. So that it's important to recognize happiness is not guaranteed, Jason, by the state or in service to any of the classes. It's not a guarantee, right? It's on me, it's on you to find your own happiness even if the institution that you're serving collapses. And it will. I will fail you. I will fail you. You will say, hey, Dr. Campbell, can you do a series on so-and-so? And I won't. You will send me an email, some of you, and I won't respond. I will fail you. But you can't lose your own sense of happiness or your own sense of purpose or your own sense of direction if you are in the apprentice class when the master fails you. I similarly can't lose my sense of direction when everything that I do in service to the state seems to fail me. I now recognize I'm a bit smarter now, but you know, I learn too. Oh, sorry. This is just, you know, part of this is just straight up mania rambling. I don't even know, I mean, I'm lecturing on a whole nother level now, but I think part of this is just straight up rambling, right? It's not really rambling, it's me living out the lecture, like real time, which is weird. Alright, so come together and cooperate, right? The idea is we have to, one, come together and cooperate, right? And since, quote, each class can attain the perfection of which it is capable and yet serve, we recognize that there is an obligation to give back to the state, insofar as you've gotten from the state, insofar as you've gotten from me. Right? It's let's not even go as high as the state. That's not an obligation that many people have. But you've gotten from me, many of you, I'm about to hit 1 million views, right? Many of you have gotten education from me, have learned from me, which just gives me a tremendous amount of satisfaction to know that I'm helping, right? In service, in accepting my obligation and living out my obligation real time. Well, now it's not real time for you, it's real time for me now. Real time, talking about the now. Real time, living out my obligation for you in service of the state. It's you then who have the obligation, after you got this knowledge, to disseminate it and incorporate it in however you do it. The idea is, and this is, I mean, for me, this is, you know, I don't want to be, you know, the word patriot is just so freaking corny. Probably one of the greatest books I've ever read was Patriotism. Super thin, like 40, 50 page book. You can read it in a half an hour maybe. The idea is, however, and this is, you know, it's weird to even discuss it because it's just too abstract for many, and even for, you know, well, anyway, so just to get to the point. The idea is there is a debt owed. You might not believe this. And now, this is Al-Farabi, and this is more of a contemporary application of Al-Farabi. But the idea is that there is a debt owed to the state. Think about this in Platonic sense, right? And we know that Al-Farabi borrows from Plato. In Plato's Phaedo, which is the culmination of Socrates, the character. Socrates is the first martyr for philosophy. And Socrates recognizes, right, through the Euthyphro that he's going to go on trial, and through the apology that he's going to try to defend himself. And then finally, in the Phaedo, that he is unwilling to relent his objective, which is educating the masses. Well, not the masses per se, but educating the followers, the apprentices, right? Educating that small population of apprentices to elevate their consciousness, if you will. And he's not going to stop doing that because that's what he's told. He's like, listen, you can live if you stop doing it. And he's like, I'm not going to stop doing it. So then the point is, oh, well, then you're going to die. And he's like, well, you don't have to kill me. I'll kill myself. I'll drink the hemlock and I'll go out in a bang. Before he is actually sentenced to death, he has a friend that comes in, and his friend goes, hey, dude, listen, I can bribe I got a lot of money. I can bribe the guards. We can get you out. You can go to Sparta. We can leave. You don't have to stay in Athens. Let's get out of here. And it's for me, this scene, and also the combination of Al-Farabi defines me as an individual. And I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but Socrates' denial of fleeing is, for me, it's just,